It's easy to get stuck reaching for the same familiar fruits and vegetables, even when you know a colorful variety is key. Balance of Nature's fruits and veggie supplements don't replace fruits and vegetables, but it makes it easy to add more variety to what you already eat. With 31 ingredients that are whole fruits and vegetables, switching it up is easy because we've already taken care of the hard part. Go to balanceofnature.com and get a free fiber and spice supplement, plus 35% off your first set as a new preferred customer by using discount code POD.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
I'm Roger Stone, and you're joining us on the Roger Stone Show, broadcasting today from Washington, D.C., where it is a dreary and overcast day. We'll be talking politics, news, history, and dare I say it, culture in the next 2 hours, and we thank you for joining us. I have long said that the Russian collusion hoax was the greatest single dirty trick in American political history, an abuse of power in which the full authority of the United States government and the extraordinary capabilities of our intelligence agencies were politically weaponized against Donald Trump when he was the surprise winner of the 2016 election. I have long questioned right here on the Roger Stone Show whether anyone would ever be held accountable for this extraordinary political scandal. This dwarfs Watergate by comparison. But Friday, we learned that a federal grand jury issued subpoenas for former CIA Director John Brennan, as well as former FBI officials Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, and as many as 30 others, in what appears to be the beginning of a serious grand jury investigation into the abuses of Russiagate. This probe is evidently, according to Fox, being overseen by U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, Jason Redding Quonis. Quonis is among the few U.S. attorneys in the country who has been confirmed by the U.S. Senate. Now, why Florida? That's a pretty simple explanation if you believe, as I do, that this was a seditious conspiracy that was born on July 17th of 2017 in an Oval Office meeting chaired by Barack Obama himself that included Vice President Joe Biden, National Security Advisor Susan Rice, FBI Director James Comey, CIA Director John Brennan, then ODNI Director James Clapper, and others. This was a seditious conspiracy that begins there, continues through the use of the so-called Steele dossier, which was a fabricated report commissioned and paid for by Hillary Clinton's campaign, which falsely claimed that Donald Trump had dallied with prostitutes in Russia when visiting there as a private businessman, alleging, therefore, that the Russians somehow had some leverage over President Donald Trump, but went on to claim, essentially, that the Russians had, through the hack of the Democrat National Committee, assisted in the release of WikiLeaks documents that allegedly assisted in Donald Trump's election. All of this, of course, is false. Now we know, based on declassified documents ordered released by President Trump himself and released by the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, that John Brennan, the Director of Central Intelligence, knew of the dubious nature of the Steele dossier, but he included it anyway in the intelligence community briefing that tied President Trump to Russia while presented to President Barack Obama, even while top CIA intelligence analysts warned that the evidence that this was accurate was seriously lacking. The documents that were declassified by Tulsi Gabbard, the former Democrat congresswoman who now is a Republican and serves as the Director of National Intelligence, make it clear that John Brennan was politically motivated in his agenda against President Trump and weaponized national security in order to damage him. Then, of course, the FBI officer, Peter Strzok, launched Crossfire Hurricane, the operation investigating President Trump as a Russian agent. That was in July of 2016. At the same time, he was having an illicit affair with Lisa Page, who worked on the team of special counsel Robert Mueller, and then with the FBI's Office of General Counsel, that would be a man named James Baker. Their leaked text messages shows that they were all plotting against President Trump based on partisan political agendas. On Friday, we learned, finally, that subpoenas have been released and delivered to Brennan, the former CIA director, who, interestingly enough, is a admitted communist, I believe an Islamic convert from his days as the station chief of the CIA in Riyadh. It was also as the station chief in Riyadh that John Brennan signed the visas for 4 of the men who were accused of attacking America as hijackers in 9/11. So these subpoenas are hopefully the beginning of a series of indictments of Russian-Gate scamsters. The leaks have already produced enough evidence to show clear guilt. These intelligence officers maliciously targeted the president in an attempt to undemocratically overturn the 2016 election. This was a coup d'etat. It's time for them to be prosecuted for treason. Hitting them with lesser charges, to me, is unacceptable. Letting them off with a slap on the wrist can also not be tolerated. Swift example should be made of Strzok, Page, Clapper, and all of the co-conspirators in what was the greatest single scandal in American history. And the deep state has to be defanged before the public can have trust in any of these institutions once again. Meanwhile, in breaking news, for nearly 5 years, the FBI has maintained a $500,000 reward for information on the hooded figure who planted 2 pipe bombs outside the Democrat National Committee and the Republican National Committee headquarters on the evening of January 5th, 2021. On November 8th, 2025, Capitol events took a dramatic twist when the investigative journalist Steve Baker of Blaze Media revealed the identity of the long-sought pipe bomber as one Shawnee Ray Kirchhoff, a former U.S. Capitol Police officer. Kirchhoff, who was then 27 years old and serving in the Capitol Hills Civil Disturbance Unit, was allegedly caught red-handed using cutting-edge forensic gait analysis software that matched her walking pattern, a distinctive limp from a soccer injury she obtained in 2015 when she had a broken tibia, also proved her height to be 5'7", and based on the technology's measure, this technology has a 94 to 98% probability rate. The first time the public ever heard of Shawnee Kirchhoff was during her 2022 sworn testimony in the trial of January 6th protester Guy Ruffett, a moment now pivotal in the pipe bombing case. She admitted personally firing dozens of pepperball projectiles from the Upper West Terrace of the Capitol, known as the Crow's Nest, actually hitting unarmed protesters in the face. Kirchhoff's role in the Capitol Police was no average assignment. From 2018 to 2022, she was a certified training officer specializing in less lethal munitions, including pepper balls and impact projectiles used to control crowds. Surveillance recordings from January 6th revealed that Kirchhoff and fellow officers deployed these very same weapons against protesters on the Capitol's Western Plaza just minutes before the initial breach of the Capitol. This positioning placed her at the epicenter of the chaos, raising immediate questions about whether her expertise in crowd dispersal played a much larger role to escalate that day's events. Insiders in this probe, including ex-FBI agents Kyle Seraphin, revealed the Bureau stationed surveillance teams one door down from Shawnee Kirchhoff's Alexandria, Virginia home just days after January 6th, only to yank them off the case without a word. raising red flags about whether there was some deliberate obstruction of justice in this investigation. Now, the bombs themselves were described to me as rudimentary, constructed from 1-hour kitchen timers, fireworks powder, and everyday materials. These devices were concealed, in one case, in an alley near the Democrat National Committee at 7:45 p.m. on January 5th, with the second one placed near the Republican National Committee 30 minutes later. A hooded figure in Nike apparel and a backpack matching Kirchhoff's 5'7" athletic frame and slight limp were captured on surveillance, departing the scene on foot. This is what caught them in the end. The pipe bombs were discovered early that afternoon, the RNC device around 12:40 p.m. by a Capitol Hill resident, and the device near the Democrat National Committee around 1:07 p.m. by U.S. Capitol police officers as crowds from the Stop the Steal rally began approaching the Capitol, creating a diversion that most now describe as a calculated false flag to justify the authoritarian response that day. What elevates all of this to a full-blown conspiracy is Kirchhoff's swift post-January 6th career trajectory. Just 6 months after the riot, she left the Capitol Police for a high-level security role at the Central Intelligence Agency, where sources say she joined dignitary protection teams safeguarding top officials, including, unbeknownst to him, no doubt, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, allegedly by anonymous intelligence sources, but CIA explicitly contradicted the dignitary protection detail in a post-publication statement on Friday. So we're unsure. But the CIA did confirm to Blaze News that Kirchhoff works in a campus security, but her rapid promotion has fueled speculation of some kind of reward for services rendered. After leaving the Capitol Police in mid-2021 to join the CIA, Kirchhoff reportedly deleted all of her social media posts. I'm Roger Stone. We're bringing you breaking news about the Capitol Hill pipe bomber. It has taken the FBI forever to tell us anything about this horrific abuse on January 6th, but now it appears that the Blaze has broken this story. Here is the central question. Will Kirchhoff be arrested and will she be charged? And what has the FBI been doing all this time? I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Networks, and we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
It's easy to get stuck reaching for the same familiar fruits and vegetables, even when you know a colorful variety is key. Balance of Nature's fruits and veggie supplements don't replace fruits and vegetables, but it makes it easy to add more variety to what you already eat. With 31 ingredients that are whole fruits and vegetables, switching it up is easy because we've already taken care of the hard part. Go to balanceofnature.com and get a free fiber and spice supplement, plus 35% off your first set as a new preferred customer by using discount code POD.
The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. I'm joining you today from Washington, D.C., where it is an overcast and rather dreary day. Had the opportunity to meet with Vice President J.D. Vance yesterday, very briefly. And I must say I am more and more impressed with J.D. Vance every time I meet him and every time I see him speak. He is an extraordinarily loyal and capable public servant. And, of course, in the Republican Party, he is the presumptive favorite to follow President Donald Trump. In the Republican Party, we believe in hegemony. We believe in the natural order of things. Of course, Vice President Mike Pence would have been in line to be the presidential nominee post-Trump till he essentially destroyed his career. Now, incredibly, late last week in an interview, former Vice President Pence refused to rule out yet another run for president in 2028, as this disgraced coward believes that he can come back after stabbing President Trump in the back when he needed him most, and then going on an anti-Trump hate tour for several years that he actually, I guess, believed would advance his political aspirations. Now, many of my friends who are inside the political business believe that former Vice President Mike Pence plotted with former Republican National Chairman Reince Priebus to plant the famous NBC Billy Bush grab them by the, well, you know what story, which was designed to cause a panic at the Republican National Committee, in which there was actually an attempt to dethrone Donald Trump as the duly elected Republican nominee for president. See, the Republican National Committee does have the authority to replace the Republican nominee if Trump could have been pressured into dropping from the race after the NBC story broke. Trump, never the quitter, refused to step down. In fact, he doubled down. And while many thought that that would be the end of Trump and his candidacy, turned out voters didn't really.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
If we knew more about our sleep, what would we do differently? Would we go to bed at a consistent time or take steps to reduce interruptions to our sleep? With the all-new Sleep Score, Apple Watch measures your bedtime consistency, interruptions, and sleep duration. Then, every morning it combines these factors into an easy-to-understand score from 1 to 100. So you'll know how to take the quality of your sleep from good to excellent. Introducing the new Sleep Score on Apple Watch. iPhone 11 or later required.
The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back. You're tuned into the Roger Stone Show here on the Red Apple Audio Network. We're talking about the fact that former Vice President Mike Pence, late last week, refused to rule out yet another run for the presidency in 2028. Now, I started to outline the failures of Mike Pence, who within the Republican Party would have been perfectly lined up to inherit the leadership of the party and would have been a likely post-Trump Republican nominee had he remained true to the MAGA agenda. Again, many of my inside political contacts tell me that he worked with Paul Ryan, who had been the vice presidential nominee with Mitt Romney and had been the former House Speaker, in the efforts to submarine Donald Trump's candidacy by the use of the famous NBC Billy Bush locker room talk tape, which many thought would end Trump's nomination. In fact, after that story broke, Donald Trump reached out to his running mate by telephone multiple times, and for almost a 72-hour period, the vice presidential candidate, Pence, didn't respond to his running mate. It was during that time that the Republican national chairman at the time, Reince Priebus, tried desperately to put together the votes to dump Donald Trump as the Republican nominee and replace him with Mike Pence, a gambit which, of course, in the end, completely failed. I'd also remind you that it was Vice President Mike Pence who jumped the gun and urged President Donald Trump to fire General Michael Flynn based on the false claim that Flynn, as the incoming national security advisor, had an inappropriate conversation with Kislyak, the Russian ambassador. Even those FBI agents who interviewed Flynn claimed that he did not lie. There is no evidence that Flynn discussed the easing of sanctions on the Russians, as was later claimed in the media, but never actually proven in his case. General Michael Flynn, who I was with only Friday night, where he was honored by the National Veterans Parade Committee. General Flynn actually led a parade here in Washington, D.C. this afternoon, honoring our veterans, something that I very strongly supported, was essentially targeted for complete and total political destruction due to the actions of Vice President Mike Pence. It's also Mike Pence who handled the botched response to the COVID-19 response. And then, of course, there were his actions on January 6th. There is a procedure under the Constitution in which it would have been completely proper to delay the certification of the Electoral College pending the outcome of litigation in a number of the states which challenged the results of the elections. This is not seditious. It is not unconstitutional. It is not a crime. I myself was not involved in this effort, although many have alleged otherwise. If there was, in fact, a war room at the Willard Hotel from which such activities were coordinated, I was never in such a war room, and I knew very little about it. I also do understand the lack of backbone among a number of Republicans in the U.S. Senate, and I never actually thought, despite the fact that there were legitimate questions about the anomalies and irregularities surrounding the 2020 election, that the Senate would delay the certification of Joe Biden's election, which, of course, they did not do. So the idea of Mike Pence as a presidential candidate is pretty laughable. In his last attempt, despite the fact that he had the stature of a former vice president, he ran in the single digits in all of the polling before he ignominiously dropped out. If you look at our party, J.D. Vance today is the strong frontrunner. I think the presumptive nominee for 2028. The establishment fears him, which is already why he's getting attacked by neocons through pathetic guilt by association attacks. I wouldn't be surprised if Florida Governor Ron DeSantis tries again to pose an establishment-backed challenge to Vance. But Mike Pence, well, I think he's completely finished. He had his opportunity to be a relevant political figure and to remembered in the history books with President Donald Trump as a groundbreaking patriot. But he blew that opportunity. And even the anti-Trumpers don't want to touch Pence because they know he's a weaselly, spineless, and known for his lack of leadership. He will never be accepted by Republican primary voters. If Pence runs for president in 2028, I predict he embarrasses himself worse than he did in 2024, a campaign that resonated with virtually nobody. In the meantime, the Republican Party has a deep bench of potential contenders, including, of course, not only Vice President J.D. Vance, but the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. I supported Rubio in his Senate race against Florida Republican turned independent turned Democrat Charlie Crist, and I've never regretted it. I think Rubio has been one of the surprise standouts of President Trump's cabinet, particularly given his hard line against communism in this hemisphere, specifically in Venezuela and in Cuba, and increasingly in Honduras. Honduras is a place where the Biden Justice Department essentially charged the sitting president, Hernandez, with drug trafficking in an effort to get him out of the way. I think he was framed in that. He was, in fact, hardline against the drug traffickers. But he was convicted on the basis of the testimony of two convicted drug traffickers who were released from prison in return for their false testimony against the president. Now, Xiomar Castro, who is not related to Fidel Castro, but might as well be, is beginning to let the Honduras be used as a staging ground for the continued narco-Marxist terrorism and trafficking going on in the region. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has stood tall against that. Late Friday, there was very good news indeed when I learned that President Donald Trump had pardoned former New York City police detective Michael McMahon. If you're a listener here at the Stone Zone, you may remember that we had Michael McMahon's wife on the show just days ago. She, of course, was the famous actress Martha Byrne, who appeared in Days of Our Lives, Hospital, a number of other soap operas. She was an Emmy winner. She made an eloquent case for her husband's innocence. See, China has been on an intelligence rampage inside America since the Obama administration began, and the Obama-Biden team has dismissed the Chinese threat, basically ignoring the Biden family receipt of foreign bribes, among other things. Incredibly, Michael McMahon, who was a decorated New York police officer with an unblemished record of service to the people of New York, was hired as a licensed private investigator to look into the case of a foreign Chinese national who had entered the United States illegally and who had embezzled an enormous amount of money from the Chinese government. But Michael McMahon didn't know all of that. All Michael McMahon knew was that he had been retained by a U.S.-based company to try to track down this individual who had embezzled funds. When Michael McMahon bumped into a huge U.S.-based Chinese communist intelligence operation in which the Chinese were tracking allegedly their own citizens, but presumably others, instead of indicting the Chinese criminal, they turned around and indicted Michael McMahon. This has been an extraordinary abuse of power, and it is amazing that in his trial, no evidence of payment from any foreign entity was submitted. No proof that Michael McMahon knew that he was working for Chinese interests was presented. But Michael McMahon, an innocent man, was railroaded. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison, and he was ordered to pay an $11,000 fine for allegedly acting as an illegal agent for the government of the People's Republic of China. He was also charged with interstate stalking and conspiracy to commit the same. The whole thing was based really on the fact that he bumped into something called Operation Foxtrot. Operation Foxtrot was this very aggressive and nefarious operation in which the Communist Chinese operated police stations across the country with Chinese special operators sneaking across the southern border and with the secret repatriation efforts of Chinese intelligence. But who were the supposed victims in all of this drama? In his role as a licensed private investigator after his service to the people of New York City as a police officer, he had been hired by a New York-based company in 2016 to locate a person named Jin Yu, who had stolen millions of dollars from a Chinese-based construction company. He was tasked with locating the embezzled funds and was able to, in an effort to exfiltrate them out of China. What did the government know about Jin Yu and Fang Liu, also a co-conspirator? Both are former CCP officials who had significant government positions in, you can't make this up, Wuhan, China. Both Jin Yu and his wife in a U.S. federal court filing are listed as foreign Chinese nationals who received green cards under the EB-5 program, even though they were fugitives from justice and their petitions contained false information. So the real narrative of this obfuscated story should be something more like New Jersey private investigator sacrificed by the FBI to protect a wanted, high-ranking Communist Chinese Party official who was illegally in the United States. I was actually pleased to receive a call from a New York Times reporter late on Friday asking me whether I had advocated for the pardon of Michael McMahon. Well, it depends on what you mean by advocating. I had his wife, Martha Byrne, right here on the Roger Stone Show to talk about this case. I also wrote an extensive column about it on my website, The Stone Zone. Did I ever speak to the president directly about it? No, the answer is no, I did not. Did I ever lobby in favor of him other than those written words, which I published online? The answer is no. How did Michael McMahon come to President Trump's attention? That's a question I don't know the answer to. I'm only glad that he did. There's a lot of discussion about the pardon process because, well, Joe Biden in the closing days of his administration pardoned his entire family, including his son and his brother and other members of his family, for any crime that they may have committed during his presidency. Whether those pardons stand for crimes committed when he was vice president, that's an open legal question. It's likely that Joe Biden himself actually signed those pardons, but other pardons, for example, pardons for Adam Schiff or Congresswoman Liz Cheney or other members of the January 6th committee, or even the pardon for Dr. Anthony Fauci, appear to have been signed by an auto pen. That means we wonder whether Joe Biden was even aware that these pardons had been given, or whether he had actually approved them. Now, many people believe that the auto pen pardons should be challenged. I agree with that. I'm not an attorney, but attorneys that I have consulted tell me that the way to do so is to charge someone with a crime. After a grand jury approves those charges, they will then argue that the auto pen generated pardon shields them from prosecution, and then there can be a legal proceeding that questions the authority and the legal viability of the auto pen pardon. The sooner this happens, the better, because I believe that, for example, Dr. Anthony Fauci, who very clearly lied to Congress on matters that were material to the American people, is among those who should be prosecuted. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. We got more politics when we come back on the other side. So whatever you do, please don't touch that dial, because we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back on the Roger Stone Show right here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Well, as I predicted, Zohran Mamdani has been easily elected mayor of the Big Apple. Now, Mamdani is not just another progressive. He is a radical ideologue born of the same foreign militant sympathies that have infected academia and New York City politics for years. A member of the Democratic Socialists of America, he preaches Marxist redistribution, identifies with the Global South's revolutionary movements, and defends terror-linked groups under the banner of liberation. This is not the first time New Yorkers have elected a man with allegiances alien to America's values. Bill de Blasio, who, by the way, is not an Italian-American. His real name is William Wilhelm Jr., publicly supported and joined the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, once actually honeymooned in communist Cuba, and was so compromised that he could not, when he was mayor, obtain the basic security clearances routinely granted to every mayor in the United States when he or she traveled. It was under his leadership that crime surged, police morale collapsed, and the city descended into filth and lawlessness. Now, Mamdani, under his leadership, I believe New York is on the precipice of something even darker. Under Mamdani, I predict to you the police will be vilified, ultimately defunded and demoralized. The New York City Police Department has already been politicized. Experts tell me that the crime statistics that are regularly submitted to the FBI have already been jiggered to try to convince New Yorkers that there is a drop in crime rates, which our everyday experiences would indicate to us are not the case. Prosecutors going forward will treat criminals as victims and victims as obstacles to equity. The gangs that now terrorize parts of the Bronx and Brooklyn will expand their reach into neighborhoods once considered safe. I predict to you that investors will flee, real estate prices will collapse, and the great towers of Manhattan will empty as confidence evaporates, and capital flees to places like Florida, Texas, and Dubai. New York's Jewish population will face a new wave of hostility masquerading as anti-Zionism. I'm already disgusted by the swastikas that were painted near synagogues in New York City. At the same time, the city's Christian churches will be shamed for their traditions. Its schools will be indoctrination centers for revolutionary politics, the city schools. City Hall will become a propaganda outpost for more anti-American causes. No, I'm afraid this is not hyperbole. This is just not political talk. I think this is the reality facing New Yorkers. Elections have consequences, and the consequences for Mamdami's victory, I predict, for New York City will be dire. In the meantime, I know that Americans don't like dynasties, but with the announcement that veteran Democrat Congressman Jerry Nadler will retire at the end of this term, it appears to me that there is a very interesting contest shaping up in New York's 12th congressional district. It was announced last week that Jake Schlossberg, who is the grandson of President John F. Kennedy, is considering a bid for the Democratic nomination for Congress. It has previously been reported that Chelsea Clinton, who is reputed to be the daughter of Bill and Hillary Clinton, is also eyeing a congressional race in that same district. And then late Friday, there were actually reports that former Governor Andrew Cuomo himself may be considering the race. He, of course, is the son of legendary New York Governor Mario Cuomo. So you have three candidates here, all of whom are solidly connected to major Democrat Party dynasties. This is an overwhelmingly Democrat district, of course, in which no Republican would have a chance. But watching this primary carefully, for those of us who love politics and are political junkies, will be delightful. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show, and we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. So Congresswoman Elise Stefanik last Thursday announced her candidacy for the governorship of New York. She'll be challenging incumbent Democrat Kathy Hochul in next year's election. And I think she may have the best chance of becoming a Republican governor of the Empire State since George Pataki left office in 2006. There is no question that the election of Zohran Mamdani could potentially enhance the prospects of Elise Stefanik to win the governorship, depending on how quickly New York City deteriorates under the socialist jihadi policies of Mamdani. New York City has already experienced a crime epidemic, and we are already the most highly taxed state in the nation. But the announcement by Stefanik has drawn universal praise from Republicans and, of course, predictably scorn from Democrats. The New York State Assembly Republican leader, William Barclay, said that Elise Stefanik embodies the leadership that America desperately needs, fearless, driven, and fiercely committed to the people of our great state. While New York State Senator Mark Walshek said that Elise's vision for New York is a breath of fresh air for independents, Republicans, Democrats, and all New Yorkers who want a better future for our next generation. We, of course, don't endorse candidates for public office here on the Roger Stone Show, but I know Elise Stefanik. I think she is smart, tough, resourceful, precisely the kind of leader that could win in New York State, because I think she has broad appeal beyond that, of course, of just Republicans or Republican-leaning independents. I agree with the New York State Republican leader, Rob Ortt, who said that Elise Stefanik is the fighter that New York needs right now. Tough, smart, and unafraid to take on the radical left. What impressed me the most about Elise Stefanik is that she was willing to challenge the judicial weaponization of Donald Trump when they attempted to use the New York state courts to keep him off the ballot, to bankrupt him, and to throw him into prison. She stood tall, making formal complaints regarding corrupt New York state and federal judges. And very recently, a Emerson College poll showed that she only trailed the incumbent, Kathy Hochul, by a mere 5 points. To me, that means that we're looking at a viable candidacy and a very close and hard-fought race. In the meantime, however, it remains to be seen whether Kathy Hochul, who not everybody will remember, was the lieutenant governor handpicked by Andrew Cuomo, who ascended to the governor's office only after Cuomo resigned in the face of impeachment over claims that he had sexually harassed or perhaps assaulted various women, has problems with her own party. Now, if you understand how New York State government works, the governor of New York still has very substantial financial strings on the city of New York and New York City's mayor. There's always traditionally been tension between governors and mayors. The tension I'm thinking of between Governor Nelson Rockefeller and Mayor John Lindsay, or Governor Mario Cuomo and Mayor Ed Koch. But because of the takeover of the New York, indeed the National Democrat Party, by the progressive wing of that party, Kathy Hochul was made to bend the knee. She warmly endorsed Mamdani, but Mamdani did not respond with his endorsement of Kathy Hochul. In fact, asked in the first debate, or perhaps it was the second debate, with his opponents, whether he would endorse or support Hochul, he refused to say that he would do so. I saw that Kathy Hochul followed the mayor all the way to Puerto Rico for a Somos conference there, was effusive in her praise of the governor of New York. This is someone who is trying to fend off a primary herself. I'm not sure that Kathy Hochul can get through a Democrat primary. Having spent 50 years as a political analyst and consultant, I've studied years and years of data and polling. Now, there are two kinds of polls. There are polls that are pre-designed to show a desired result. Those are sometimes called push polls, but they're rigged. They are either based on the sample size or the wording of the questions or the order of the questions. Some polls are designed to elicit a predetermined response. But if you study polls that are designed to have a sizable, properly drawn sample, where the questions and the order of the questions are written in an unbiased and completely neutral way, you get an actual result. Based on polls that I have studied, I have actually never seen a public figure with a higher unfavorable and lower job approval rating than Kathy Hochul. In a perfect world, and of course nothing is perfect, but I believe that a Hispanic woman candidate, if such a candidate exists in the Democrat Party, would be perfectly positioned to defeat her. Now, governors in New York are extraordinarily constitutionally powerful. The governor of Connecticut, Raymond Baldwin, once told the governor of New York, Tom Dewey, if I had the constitutional power that you had, I wouldn't have been governor of Connecticut, I would have been king. And we cannot underestimate the enormous influence and power that a sitting New York governor has. But nonetheless, this appears to me like it will be a highly competitive race. Democrats will attempt to paint Stefanik as a pawn of President Donald Trump, but I don't expect those attacks to stick. Although Stefanik is one of the most staunch supporters of the president in Congress, she's made it clear that she's her own woman with a strong voice, and I believe she can appeal to independents and moderates. Standout in her record, of course, has her been fighting for the final setup of the strategic defense of the United States, the so-called missile defense. They called it Star Wars. They called it all kinds of names when Ronald Reagan was president, but it is essentially the Strategic Defense Initiative that protects Israel today from incoming ICBM missiles. The money for this was appropriated long ago, but it has never been built on the East Coast of the United States, and Elise Stefanik has been a strong proponent for building this system and locating it in Fort Drum in upstate New York, which, of course, is the exact right place for it. I'm looking forward to a spirited race but I think Elise Stefanik is the most viable Republican candidate that the New York Republican Party has nominated in decades. Meanwhile, Representative Brandon Gill, a congressman from Texas, has filed articles of impeachment against Judge James Boasberg, the chief judge of the U.S. District Court of the District of Columbia. At long last, perhaps we will get judicial accountability to the tyranny of lifetime appointed federal judges who think that they can undo the mandate of the last presidential election. It was Judge Boasberg who oversaw the so-called Arctic frost investigation, which saw special counsel Jack Smith unconstitutionally abuse his authority to conduct illegal surveillance on President Trump, many U.S. senators, and some of President Trump's most prominent supporters, including, well, me, as well as conservative institutions such as Turning Point USA. Judge Boasberg even signed off on a gag order sent to AT&T and Verizon telling them not to notify U.S. senators about the subpoenas delving into their private telephone data, which AT&T did not comply with. Verizon, to their great shame, actually did comply with those unconstitutional acts. Congressman Gill said that Chief Judge Boasberg has compromised the impartiality of the judiciary and created himself a constitutional crisis. He shamelessly weaponized his judicial power against his political opponents, including Republican members of Congress who were faithfully serving the American people within their jurisdiction. Judge Boasberg was an accomplice in the egregious Arctic frost scandal, where he equipped the Biden Department of Justice to spy on Republican senators. This is a clear violation of the separations of power aspects of our U.S. Constitution. I think the judge's lack of integrity here makes him clearly unfit for the gavel. So I was glad to see that Congressman Gill, a freshman congressman from Texas, freshmen are normally seen but not heard, sponsored this article of impeachment against Judge Boasberg to hold him accountable for his high crimes and misdemeanors. So far, there are 11 co-sponsors on this message, which is active in the U.S. House of Representatives. Boasberg also issued an emergency order early this year that temporarily halted the deportation of illegal immigrants, questioning whether the president had such authority. He was not upheld by the Supreme Court in that matter either. Boasberg has become among the most belligerent enemies of President Donald Trump on the bench, and he seems to keep getting the assigned case after case that gives him the opportunity to obstruct President Trump's agenda. Congressman Gill's measure is more than deserved, in my opinion. Boasberg is an activist leftist judge who abuses his power to attack the rule of law. I hope he will be impeached and then convicted, so that judges realize that their power is not sacrosanct. They are duty-bound to support the U.S. Constitution, and if they do not do so, they too will face the consequences. One final piece of good news before I take a break, and that is to tell you that my dog, Pee-wee 2.0, who only weeks ago was poisoned along with his sister Mimi, both of them Yorkshire Terriers from the same litter, has now finally, after many, many trips to the veterinary hospital, come back with a perfect blood test and is completely well. But I also must attribute Rough Greens, that's RUFF Greens, terrific product that is a sponsor of this show, for this amazing recovery. This line of natural foods and vitamins for dogs and cats, I think, played a substantial role in Pee-wee's recovery. I wanted to thank the many, many listeners to the Roger Stone Show, or those who follow me on social media, for your prayers, because, well, if you're a dog lover, as Mrs. Stone and I, the dogs are like our children, and I'm happy to tell you that my baby, Pee-wee 2.0, is now back to himself. God bless you, and God bless the many who prayed for him, and I thank God for his full recovery. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Networks, and we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back on the Roger Stone Show, joining you today from our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. I've noticed that the big tech elite have been sucking up to President Trump for the first year of his improbable second presidency. They've been donating money to him, admitting that they made mistakes during the stolen election of 2020. They seem to like they're getting on board when it comes to free speech. But Dr. Robert Epstein, writing for the Daily Caller, argued that this is a ruse designed to lull President Trump and the Republicans into a false sense of security. Epstein, who is himself not a Republican, actually a liberal Democrat, but above all a data scientist, points out that over 95% of Google's donations have gone to Democrats, with Google's parent company, the Alphabet company, being Kamala Harris's top donor in 2024. They've created permanent election infrastructure designed, he says, to help Democrats. On October 31st of last year, Google sent out 50% more go vote reminders to Democrats than they did to Republicans on their homepage. Now, they gave President Trump's inauguration $1 million as a way to cozy up to President Trump and make the administration forget their past sins. The Department of Justice quietly backed off a Google antitrust case that could have broken up the big tech monopoly early this year, as Google continues to play nice with the Trump administration. Personally, I agree with Dr. Robert Epstein that trusting big tech to do the right thing could be the downfall for Republicans in the midterm elections. How do I know this? It's very simple. Although I continue to be banned for life today on Facebook, I recently set up a new profile on Instagram. I very quickly moved from 538 followers to almost 18,000 until miraculously the Instagram folks canceled and closed my account without explanation. After I pressed them as to why I had been deplatformed, they said that my posts were inauthentic. When I asked them why it was inauthentic, they said, well, that's because you died on November 26th of last year. But the fact that you're listening to me right now proves, I think, that I am fully and completely alive. So the bias of the big tech social media platforms and companies like Google is very much intact. I don't trust them to not cheat in the upcoming elections, and I think we need to keep a very close eye on them. Dr. Epstein has developed a website that tracks their activities. I highly recommend that you check out his story over at the Daily Caller. I'm Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show, and we'll be back with more hot politics, so please don't touch that dial.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone, and you're back on the Roger Stone Show, joining you today from Washington, D.C. Everybody inside the Beltway here is talking about President Donald Trump's call on the Senate Republicans to end the filibuster rule. But as I talk to people outside of our nation's capital, very few Americans really understand what the filibuster is. So let's do a quick tutorial, if we may. A filibuster is a U.S. Senate procedure that allows one or more senators to delay or block a vote on a bill or a nomination by extending debate on it. So in practice, it means that most legislation cannot pass the Senate unless 60 of the 100 senators vote to end the debate. That's a process called invoking cloture. So it's not 51 votes, but 60 votes that can stall a bill or a nomination indefinitely. So while a simple majority, that would be 51 votes, is enough to pass most bills, the filibuster effectively raises the threshold to 60 votes in order to move any legislation or nomination forward. So here's how it works. let's say debate begins on a bill in the U.S. Senate. If a senator or group of senators wants to block it, they can refuse to yield the floor or otherwise signal their intent to enact a filibuster. To stop the delay, the Senate leadership must file a motion for cloture. That is a motion to end the debate. But that motion requires 60 votes. If cloture passes, in other words, they get 60 votes, and the Senate votes on the bill. That vote, of course, would only require 50 votes. But if cloture fails, the bill stalls, almost always effectively killing it. This is also true of nominations. Now, historically, filibusters were very long speeches. Think Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, the famous movie featuring Jimmy Stewart. But now they're mostly procedural. In other words, just the threat of a filibuster can halt a bill or a nomination. Now, there are a few exceptions to the filibuster. Some Senate actions aren't subject to the filibuster, including, for example, budget reconciliation bills. That could pass right now with a simple majority of 51 votes. Also, presidential nominations. This is true only after a rules change in 2013 and another rules change in 2017, I believe it was. There are also certain other trade, military, or fast-track measures. Now, why does the filibuster exist? You see, it's not in the Constitution. It evolved from early U.S. Senate rules that allowed unlimited debate, reflecting the Founding Fathers' vision of the Senate as a more serious and deliberative body than the lower house. After all, the U.S. Senate has only 100 members. Now, why is this sometimes beneficial? Well, that depends on the party. When the minority party benefits, the filibuster gives the minority leverage to block or negotiate changes in legislation, and they could lift the filibuster if those negotiations are favorable or successful. It therefore prevents the majority from easily passing sweeping policy changes. So, for example, Republicans used it during the Obama years to block some of the more radical Democratic initiatives. When the majority party benefits from the filibusters when they're out of power, today's majority might one day be the minority. So often, one party will hesitate to abolish this filibuster completely. It can encourage bipartisanship, which forces cross-party cooperation, at least in theory. In other words, the senators have to get together and negotiate in order to reach the 60 votes necessary to do virtually anything. It also, therefore, protects the Senate's identity as a slower and more consensus-driven chamber. But here's why it's controversial. You see, critics say that the filibuster causes gridlock and gives a minority of senators, who represent, therefore, a minority of Americans, veto power over national policy. Its supporters of the filibuster argue that it protects minority rights and prevents rash or overly partisan legislation. The current debate, the Democrats have often called for filibuster reform, especially for issues like voting rights, abortion, or gun legislation, while Republicans have generally defended it as a safeguard against tyranny of the majority. Some proposals, including the so-called talking filibuster, require senators to physically hold the floor. Most famously, Senator Strom Thurmond held the floor for more than 24 hours in an attempt to filibuster the 1958 Civil Rights Bill, which ultimately passed the Senate anyway after Vice President Richard Nixon lined up enough Republican votes to overcome the opposition of Senate Democrats, who at that point chaired most of the major committees in the U.S. Senate. Senator Ted Cruz has told President Trump that he does not have enough votes in the U.S. Senate to end the filibuster in order to reopen the government. Unfortunately, Senator Cruz said every president in our lifetime has wanted to end the filibuster because if you want to move legislation, it necessarily slows things down. Senator Cruz said when Joe Biden was in the White House, the Democrats had the House and the Senate. It was only the filibuster that stopped us from absolute devastation and the implementation of terrible policies. President Trump said it's only a matter of time before the Democrats end the filibuster, so why not get ahead of them and muscle through as much of the MAGA agenda as possible? I agree. The president makes a good point. The president said, I think it's time for them to end the filibuster and just put everybody back to work. For example, we could vote in voter ID, vote in opposition to no mail-in voting except for the military. And I mean far-away military, people that are, or people who are very sick. I'd like to see the elections happen on one day, he said. I'd like to see not 65 days of voting from all over the place. I'd like to clean up our elections and, of course, seal our border, where we've already done a very good job. We have a strong border now, the president noted. I'd like to see new rules on immigration that could be both fair and good. There's so many things that we could put in place, including tax cuts, that we could get additionally, and we could do it all ourselves. But to do that, we have to end the filibuster. The filibuster is, and they do it too, it stops progress. The president, once again, on them immediately to end the filibuster. It's hard to disagree with President Trump's strategy here. The country's hanging by a thread, and this may be the last chance to save America. If the Senate does not use the power at their disposal, they could derail the incredible momentum that President Trump has built and give the Democrats the edge going into the midterm elections. Unfortunately, Senator Cruz and part of the Rhino gang in the U.S. Senate will take any excuse not to act. This is why conservatives have not seemed to conserve much of anything over the most recent years. In the meantime, the lawyer Abbe Lowell, who represents New York Attorney General Letitia James, has moved to dismiss the charges against Letitia James, New York Attorney General, where she's charged with both mortgage fraud and bank fraud. Imagine it this way, if you're trying to assess the motion to dismiss. It's like a defendant saying, yes, Judge, I did murder that person, but the prosecution is vindictive because the president hates me. The existence of political motivation doesn't erase the documentary evidence against Letitia James. Interestingly, when I was charged in the District of Columbia with the fabricated crime of lying about Russian collusion that never actually existed, the judge ruled that I was prohibited specifically from arguing that I had been selectively prosecuted or that my prosecution was politically motivated. But the judge in Letitia James' case will not issue such a ruling. If it did, every powerful person prosecuted by a political opponent would be immune from accountability. But that's really the precedent that Letitia James' lawyer, Abbe Lowell, is asking Judge Walker to establish. Lowell filed a 50-page motion to dismiss the federal indictment against Letitia James. His constitutional arguments are sophisticated, but his factual claims are all provably false. See, Judge Walker, the Biden-appointed judge who has been assigned this case, is about to make a decision that will determine whether documentary evidence matters when powerful officials cry political persecution. So here's what's really at stake and why this case will define American justice, in my opinion, for coming generations. If Judge Walker dismisses this case despite 40 years of documentary evidence, it will establish that any powerful official can escape accountability by claiming, well, my political opponent is targeting me. Let's be very clear. New York Attorney General Letitia James has prosecuted New Yorkers for doing exactly what she herself is now charged with, mortgage fraud and bank fraud. So think about what happens next. A corrupt governor indicted for bribery can cry political motivation. A senator caught on tape taking bribes can scream weaponization of the justice system. Mayors with mountains of financial fraud evidence, it's a revenge prosecution. Judge Walker's ruling could become their very blueprint. The false choice that Abbe Lowell, the attorney for New York Attorney General Letitia James, wants to accept is this. Dismiss this as a protection of Letitia James' constitutional rights, or proceed, which he says will be a validation of a revenge prosecution. That is a false dichotomy. The real question is simply this. Did Letitia James commit federal crimes spanning a 40-year period through 5 presidencies starting during the Reagan administration? The documents presented at whitecollarfraud.com by fraud investigator Sam Antar clearly establish that she did indeed, over a 40-year period, serially violate the law, lying in every single one of the mortgage applications that she filed in an attempt to secure a mortgage with a more beneficial rate, a tax break, or a lower insurance rate. Lowell is betting that Judge Walker won't actually look at the documents. His motion makes 3 specific factual claims about her property in Brooklyn, every one of which is false. Claim number 1, there's only $800 in benefits. The document, the federal indictment, explicitly calculates $18,000 in benefits, not $800, but it gets worse. James' 2023 financial disclosure shows that the property value was appraised at between $100,000 and $150,000, but the disclosed mortgages on the property are between $250,000 and $400,000. So the loan-to-value ratio is 167% to 400%. No legitimate lender issues a 250% plus property value loan. It's actually mathematically and statistically impossible. An independent title research revealed that a freedom mortgage, which the Attorney General disclosed on her financial disclosure forms, don't exist, that a national mortgage that she disclosed on her state financial disclosure forms does not exist, but an OVM financial mortgage does exist, but it's hidden from the disclosures that the Attorney General made from 2020 to 2024. So she's reporting phantom mortgages while concealing the real mortgage. That's not a mistake. That's systematic fraud. Lowell's claim number 2, there was only $1,350 collected in rent. This claim confuses net rental income after deductions with gross rental income. They're different lines on the schedule. Thompson, the niece of Letitia James testified that she paid no rent whatsoever. The New York Times actually reported that. So here's the trap that I think that Abbe Lowell has walked into. If Thompson paid 0, then that's tax fraud because Letitia James falsely reported rental income and expenses on the property, and mortgage fraud because she violated the mandatory personal use requirement. I think Letitia James is about to learn, as she has said so many times, that no person is above the law. This is the Roger Stone Show. I'm Roger Stone. We'll be right back with more politics on the other side. So whatever you do, continue to follow us online or don't touch that dial.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back. As you know, I like to take your questions, which you can send to us by going to Ask Stone at rogerstoneshow.com. We have a few questions that came in this week that I want to address. Sarah from Croton-on-Hudson says that Vice President Dick Cheney died this week. You helped Dick Cheney become vice president. What are your reflections on his passing? Dick Cheney was the ultimate Washington insider. He first came to Washington as a protege of White House Chief of Staff, later Secretary of Defense Don Rumsfeld, but later eclipsed Rumsfeld himself, becoming the Chief of Staff for President Gerald Ford. Now, because Rumsfeld and George H.W. Bush had been bitter rivals, both maneuvering for the presidency under presidents both Nixon and Ford, a goal that George H.W. Bush got to, but which that Rumsfeld failed to achieve. When George W. Bush, the governor of Texas, called on Dick Cheney to head the vice presidential search committee for him, I was not surprised when Cheney systematically eliminated every other potential candidate for vice president and came up with a recommendation of, well, you guessed it, Dick Cheney himself. Dick Cheney, as Vice President of the United States, of course, lied this nation into war. He claimed, without any proof whatsoever, that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, that Saddam Hussein had yellow cake uranium, which was an ingredient for the building of a nuclear bomb. He essentially destroyed the career of the National Security Advisor, General Powell, by making him swear to this on the floor of the United Nations. He also promulgated the lie that Iraq had somehow been involved in the attack on America on 9/11, which, of course, they weren't. I have written and said that my assistance to the Bush-Cheney ticket in the recount in Florida in 2000 was among my greatest mistakes, something that I later regretted when they lied us into war. This, of course, was long before I wrote my book, The Bush Crime Family, and realized the epic corruption of both Dick Cheney and later his daughter, Liz Cheney. What's amazing, of course, is that the media vilified Dick Cheney as the ultimate villain. They treated him as if he was Darth Vader himself, until his daughter, Liz Cheney, rose as a critic within the Republican Party of President Donald Trump. Then suddenly Dick Cheney was a statesman. I'm surprised that he lasted as long as he did after several heart transplants, but they say the good die young. Dick Cheney, I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but I think he was intrinsically evil, and my guess is he's in a much, much warmer place right now. Nancy Pelosi also announced that she's retiring from Congress. I have only one question. It's a simple one. How did she amass a fortune of $163 million based on her most recent financial disclosure forms as required of members of Congress on a $200,000 a year salary? Can you say insider trading? This is why I hope the U.S. Congress, when they come back, will take up the bill by Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna that prohibits members of Congress from trading stocks or bonds during their service in the Congress. It is a badly needed reform that will help clean up the system. I'm Roger Stone. Thanks for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show. Until we meet again, God bless you and Godspeed. And remember, a man is not finished when he is defeated. He is only finished when he quits. In the struggle for freedom and our U.S. Constitution, I will never quit. God bless you and God.
Thanks for listening to The Roger Stone Show. You can hear The Roger Stone Show Sunday afternoons at 3. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?
If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy.
Download and subscribe
at BeBullish.com.